Yeah.
All right, y'all. So my name is Tremaine Prello II, and I am here with my guest, Kofi Hunter. Just introduce yourself to the people, man, and let us know what you're about.
Oh man, I'm Kofi Hunter. I'm born and raised in Queens, New York, Jamaica, Queens. Um, I'm an artist. I'm a musician. Um, a creative, a curator. Um, a son of the people, son of my community. Someone who tries to be of service. Yeah,
That's
that's
dope.
me. hmm
So one thing I really want to know is just like what really brought you to becoming like a creative and really doing music, and what are some of your just inspirations?
Um, Well, music in particular, I come from a musical family. So my dad, it's so funny. I literally just yesterday just posted a picture of my dad and his a band photo that my dad had from his band. This was in the 80s.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, my dad is a musician. He's retired now, but he was like a really well-known local musician, kind of like a local legend kind of thing. There's a club here in New York called SOBs. It's a really famous club um, for like the underground music scene in New York. And SOB stands for Sounds of Brazil. So at first it was just really Brazilian music that was showcased there. With my dad's band with his crew was all Black Americans, and they were like the first group like that to be in SOBs, and they had a residency there, and so he's a part of some cool stuff. My dad was is my biggest and first musical influence,
mm,
and then my older brothers all play. So my father's a drummer. He plays percussion, and so all my older brothers also drum and play percussion. So I grew up in a house filled with drum. I'm in a room right now actually filled with drums. I just Drums is just a part of I have drum right here. I was practicing right before I got on here with you, but yeah, music, drums, also culture. Um, it's just a big part of my life. Culture meaning like Black culture, African culture, Afrocentric culture. My name is Kofi, which is a Ghanaian name. It's an Akan name. Means male child born on Friday, because in the system of naming of the Akan people from Ghana, West Africa, there's a name that coincides with the day of the week for male and female. So it's deeper than just the name. It's like a spirit that exists in that day. So if you're born on that day, you take the name of that day, of the spirit of that day. So that's what mine's for Friday is Kofi. So that's what my name is Kofi. So that's like how I grew up. You know what
mm.
I mean? But like
Yeah,
into that kind of stuff. So to this day, I teach people on African drums and culture and stuff like that. So it's all connected to your questions, like what inspires me to do what I do, how I'm doing it, and why is because of how I was raised in a musical, cultural, giving um, family. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's pretty interesting just hearing about your background and how much the family and just culture is important to what you do. And that's
Yep.
something that I think is kind of missing with maybe most people, but there's a lot of people that still have that kind of energy with them,
hmm
especially in Black culture, just the importance of legacy and where we come from
That's
and
right.
just what our ancestors have did.
Well, it was stolen from us. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? It was stolen from us. So it's one of the most nefarious and kind of wicked, evil things about slavery was the erasure. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Of our lineage, our history, and you know, I honestly feel like that is the key. That's really one of the major keys to us liberating ourselves is knowledge of self, right? Like, and not in like a fantastical way, for like knowledge in like our history, our accomplishments, our systems, right? Like we have this rich, you know, world. Like we have several worlds to pull from to that will show us our worth and our value. You know what I mean? And I feel like if we tap into just a a morsel of that, we have a great opportunity to one day really truly liberate ourselves. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think about just like growing up where I grew up at, like choices I decided to not make. You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of times I didn't make certain choices because I had a certain view of myself, because I had this kind of information about who I was, who my people were, and how doing certain things were beneath me, right? Like truly, like that's not how my people act, right? Or
Yeah.
that's not, and not to like rise, not to like, just to be clear, I'm not trying to like act like, oh, I was some elevated kind of thing, but I'm just saying like decisions. I know I'm 34 years old now. All of my friends I grew up with, like almost all of them have had run-ins. And I mean, I had little stuff too, but not for real. And I think one of the main differences is the culture that I came from and that I had access to. So yeah,
Yeah, that's a big thing. Once you know, like, I know my own parents, they said the same thing. Once you know who you are, what you come from, you know what you're capable of. And that's why
that's
you
right.
try to move a certain way.
Yeah, man.
Um,
Yeah,
but how does just that upbringing and decision making translate to the music that you make as
yeah,
well?
yeah. So for me, I think about creativity. So creativity goes beyond art, right? Like you can be creative in a boardroom with ideas, right? The person who creates a new invention is creative, right? Like you're concocting new information, you're creating.
Yeah.
So you're being creative. So I come from a very creative family beyond art. So even my pops was an artist, but he also worked for the city of New York Department of Health as the executive director of minority health for the city of New York. So, which is exactly what it sounds like. He's in charge of creating initiatives to aid the health and wellness of Black and Brown people. So he did that for 30 years, right? And he created this program called Mobile Help. So it's a mobile testing unit. So it's a mobile home that drove around to like highly populated areas and gave people free HIV and AIDS testing and other STD testing. Free, they had like a station with a phlebotomist who would take the blood and all that kind of stuff. And it was just like they would park up. I remember I would be with my dad. They would park up at the West Indian Day Parade or on Eastern Parkway.
Hmm.
I remember we used to go to the Rucker Park games up at 155th in Harlem. They would park there and be testing people. Like, so that was an idea that was created, came to life. So I saw that. I saw my father. He had other businesses like, um, the women in my family, men in my family. Anybody can cook. I seen creativity that way. Like it's like creativity all around me. The way we dress, everything. So I'm like, I'm into music. In my music, I'm gonna express my creativity, right? Like that's another way for me to express it. It's just like a part of my DNA. You know what I mean? So like how it translates to my music is the same way it translates to every area of my life. Like, and for me, what creativity always also represents is being in the moment, right? And being still enough to have confidence that things are going to work out. So to try, like when you're creative mode, you're trying, you're working to figure out, to solve problems. That's what creativity really also is about, solving problems, right? So yeah, man, I hope that answers your question. I'm trying to bring it together, but yeah, it's just, if I wasn't doing music, I'd be doing something else creative.
You'd be creative in anything.
Yeah, like, you know
That's
what I
just
mean?
where you come
So
from.
right, and I do other things besides music. So that's why it's like, why, in my music it's just natural. Like, it's hard to explain. I'm just a very musical person. All my life, literally my entire life, I've been singing and drumming and making up songs and you know just performing and writing stories and um you know making jokes and, like, you know what I mean. I'm just a very creative and but keeping it music, I'm a very musical person, and I was born that way. So what inspires, it's like, it's just like breathing. It's like sometimes it feels like I don't have a choice in the matter. It just comes out, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's dope. I mean, really, with creatives, really people who are really
Hmm.
creative and come from backgrounds like that, it just seeps into all aspects
Yeah.
of life. So I definitely understand where you're coming from on that.
Hmm.
One thing I want to also talk about is your recent album that dropped, Nation
Hmm.
Time.
Hmm.
I've been playing it back a lot.
Oh wow. Oh wow.
That's really how I found you. I'm really into jazz, so I really wanted
Okay,
to.
so how'd you, I was wondering, like, how'd
Yeah.
you find it?
Well, I'm kind of the music guy, so I kind of look
Okay.
around and try to
Hmm.
see a lot of really local artists too. I like to see artists from New
Yeah.
York and listen
Hmm.
to their music. So I came across the album.
Wow.
And what struck me was
That's
just
crazy.
um
Just like I'm sorry.
yeah,
So
go ahead.
just like, you were like, were like on what, like Spotify or something like that?
Yeah, I was on well, I got Apple Music. I was on there.
Okay.
And I go through Twitter a lot too,
Uh-huh.
SoundCloud. I just like to see up and coming music. People from
Wow.
like, you can listen to the popular artists, but you really need to
Yeah,
also look
yeah,
what's coming. There's so much fuel in
yeah.
this. If
Word
you
up.
don't look and just
That was a little self-indulgent, but I
yeah,
was just curious. I was just curious because this is my first album. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So I think it's important for me to kind of get a sense of how these things are
mm,
developing, if I can. I don't have no label to take stock in all this information, so I'm
mm,
like, so how'd you find it? Oh, you found me there. Oh, I could now. I need to put more energy there so that I know that people
yeah,
are finding me there. You know what I mean? So I'm really just doing intel, but
yeah. That's a good thing.
well, thank you. Either way, I'm grateful that you found me however you did.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to talk about too is just like the timeliness of the
Mm-hmm.
record.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, First of all, just what inspired you to feel? Because I can't remember who said the quote, but there's a quote out there that you have your whole life to make your first album.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
why was now the time to really release this and make this?
Yeah, man. Like, so this year, the pandemic, you know what I mean? It really hit all of us hard, including me. You know what I mean? So I had some gigs and stuff planned, man, that were gonna be just like shifters, like those kind of gigs that kind of shift things, like, in
Mm-hmm.
a way. Um, that's what, if that's what you think anyway, right? Um, and everything got canceled, and there was no money for the foreseeable future, and I luckily got some unemployment, right? Because this is like all necessary to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was able to, like, stay afloat because that's just, I can only keep it real. Like, you know what I mean? I don't have no other gear in me. So it's like, I'm a full-time musician. So, you know, I make most of my money playing gigs out. So once all my gigs were canceled, I was like, uh-oh. Like, what the hell's going on? Am I gonna have to go get a regular job now? Like, what is going on? So with all that being said, unemployment when it came through was a big relief, you know. Um, and with that came some kind of extra money that I was like, okay, I want to like, this is around like early May. I'm like, man, I want to like, I got some music that I want to get mixed. I got some music that I recorded, and I had a project that I was working on that I wanted to put out. And like man, I got the money now. I can get it mixed and mastered and um get the artwork done better because I designed it already, but I want to like get it more professional looking. I can like shoot a video maybe, like I can do something with this, right? This is early May. Um so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do that. Then uh my birthday comes around, I announce the project, all of that. Was called I'm still gonna put it out, you know what I mean? But I announced it on my birthday, which is May 23rd, right? So this is May 23rd, 2020. I'm riding on this wave. I'm about to put out this, album, just, love songs, right? So it's not called Love Songs, but it's an album of love songs, really, truly. Um, so then May 25th, 26th, around that time, George Floyd was murdered, right? And that shit just like sent a shot through my soul. You know what I mean? Like when that happened, it just like shut me down, and it like lit a fire in me in a way that hadn't been lit before. Like I grew up in a family that's very conscious, very pro-black, very and like radically so. You know what I mean? So I was hip to the vibes, but at the same time, this shit, it was just like seeing it the way. Excuse me, I don't know if I could curse or
Oh no,
not.
you good.
I probably already been cursing. um, but like it was it just hurt, you know what I mean? And I went out and we protested in my neighborhood. Um my earpod died. Um can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Um yeah, in my we were protesting in my neighborhood in Jamaica, Queens, and the first one we went to, was all around like where I grew up going to school at. I got arrested there when I was on my 16th birthday, for having a little joint, you know what I mean? But we're marching through these places with the police, surrounded by the police. Like we're like running through the streets, like, and we're angry, you know what I mean? It's like I'm with like it's mostly black women, first of all, and it's like that I grew up with, went to school with. Like it's like my peers, like people I know. I'm looking at this is not just like it's like all black people. Like you know how you seen on the news on these marches, it's like all kinds of people, whatever. But like this is like black people from this neighborhood, young black people from this neighborhood that I grew up with. We're marching through the streets together. Like in a moment where we was really ready to go to war with the police. Like I went out there to confront the police. You know what I mean? I had a couple interactions and moments that I never even spoke about because I haven't really spoken about my experience doing a protest during that time because it's like, I don't know, doesn't feel, I don't want to like exploit it. You know what I mean? It happened for me, and if I get a chance to meet somebody, and I'll tell my kids about it, like, you know what I mean? But I went out there to confront the police, and I did, and we had exchanges. And I'm saying all that to say that experience, like, inspired us, an idea. And when I got home, I sung this melody into my phone, because at the time my laptop was at Apple, because I spilled some water in it, right?
Mm.
So I wasn't able to have my laptop. So I had GarageBand on my phone. I sung this melody. And then boom, ding, ding. I sung all of that into my phone. So that ended up being, and so I sung the melody. Then I got that on my phone, like a little keyboard that can pop up in GarageBand. So I hammer out some chords around the melody. It's not in time. It's just kind of just around it. It feels like somebody singing and I'm following them on the piano, right? And that became the song "Riding for Big Floyd," right? So that was the first thing that was the centerpiece of the album. And that was the at first I was like, I'm gonna record this song. That was the initial idea. I'm like, I'm gonna record this song, "Riding for Big Floyd," and then other ideas came. Um, I wrote a blues, which I ended up not even putting on the album, but I'm gonna use for my next album. But I wrote the "Riding for Big Floyd," and then what really shifted things. Oh, there's another song on my album called "Ntokwa,"
Mm-hmm.
which means fight or struggle in the Ghanaian language tree, the Asante language tree.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that song is about the struggle in the Black family dynamic, what the Black family dynamic can be like, that eternal struggle, but rooted in love. Um, but there's a drum rhythm that I sung into my phone. So all of this time I don't have my laptop, and in the folklore tradition of West Africa, and the African diaspora, in like monumental moments, the musicians come and create music to commemorate that moment, right? So that's what I felt like I was doing. I created a rhythm called Ntokwa to represent what I saw on the internet, this kind of back and forth that was happening between Black men and Black women. Um, so I was like, I want this rhythm to represent that. Still not thinking about recording a song. I was just like, this is a rhythm that I'm going to create, and I'm going to teach it to drummers, and they'll have it now. This is a rhythm, right? Um, you know, and I still didn't have my laptops. I got my laptop literally by the grace of God. It was just like an angel just came and dropped my laptop on me, because when I dropped it off, it was supposed to be $700 to get out, and I ended up getting it completely for free.
Oh, that's big.
Yeah, it was huge.
Mm.
And there was a pivotal moment where I was like, man, now I can write for real. Because I have an actual keyboard, but it's only a MIDI keyboard, so it only works if it's hooked up to a computer.
Mm.
And I didn't have my computer, so I couldn't write anything. So what I did then now is I used that drum rhythm and I created some chords and a melody over that. So now it's a tune, and then I conceptualized it and knew I wanted it to represent this dialogue, right? So now I had "Riding for Big Floyd" and "Ntokwa." I had 2 songs, and I had the blues, which 3 songs. And the night before, I wrote some chords and a melody that ended up being the song "Promised Land," which is the last song on the record. So I'm going into it with 4 or 5 tunes, which on a jazz record, it can be enough for it to be an album. And then throughout the process, so then it dawned on me, once I got my laptop back, once I took inventory of the music I had, I said, wow, I can make an album. right? Like I priced out a studio. I'm like, man, I can make an album right now. I'm like, man, I feel like I need to make this album right now. Like I just felt compelled. It felt, I don't know, man. I don't know how to explain it. I just felt really compelled to do this right now. And I wanted, because what I wanted to do was take a snapshot of the moment, right? Like conceptually, entrapped inside the art, trapped in the artwork for it, trapped in the music, the audio clips that I wove into it. Is a lot of stuff that's for the moment. It's definitely a for the moment kind of piece, like, which will make it, you know, it's a for the moment kind of piece. Like, it's definitely for me, you know, you didn't even ask me yet, but you know, every little thing I weaved into it was about capturing this moment. And I feel like the job of the artist is to do that, right? I saw, so if, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just doing my job, right? Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, is taking a note of what's going on right now, chronicling it, and ingesting it and regurgitating it, just to get kind of crass, in a way that is palatable for people, or in a way that gives them an escape or a means of a respite. You know what I mean? So that's like the job of the artist, and in particular musicians. You know what I mean? Like, we have to create these sonic, you know, worlds for people to live in. I think it helps. You know what I mean? So that's just like I said. I'm coming from a family of giving people. This is my offering to the moment. That's how I look at it, because, you know, that's what it is. You know what I mean? That's how it feels. It feels to me. So yeah, that's what inspired the album. It was just, you know, trying to be an addition and not a subtraction.
Yeah, I like that. One thing I definitely always have looked into and just researched myself is the history of just like the 1960s, where they had the Black
Mm-hmm.
Arts Movement. And when you spoke about just doing, this is you doing your job,
Mm-hmm.
that movement was all about the Black artist's just responsibility in speaking for the moment. And we're in a time where people need to speak up for this moment and be able to create art that encapsulates just what we're going through now,
Mm-hmm.
for future generations to look at. And I think this album is a great reflection of our moment.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and when we talk about just the energy of the album, when going through and listening to it, um, a lot of it is very just chaotic in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how it feels. Um, when I was listening to Riding for Big Floyd, one thing I noticed was there really was no breaks within it. It really didn't
Mm-hmm.
give the
Mm-hmm.
listener a chance to breathe
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that was
Mm-hmm.
just intentional. Just speak on the energy of the album and how you pace
Yeah.
everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 100% wanted to. There's a few things I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was transfer that chaos, as you said, especially on some songs more than others. A song like "Riding for Big Floyd," for me, "Riding for Big Floyd," and I'll break it down more um, uh, succinctly. But a song like "Riding for Big Floyd" for me is the soundtrack to the protest, right? Like, it felt like when we were walking through the streets doing what we were doing, I felt like I wanted to create the music that sounded like, well, it became, and it, you know, because I can't even act like when I did that, that's what I was thinking. I was not thinking that. It was truly just came out. But it became, and what it feels like to me, because, and I can say it is this because it's hard to explain. It's from me, but it's not. Like, you know what I mean? It's really through me. You know, that's really the truth. Because when it's all said and done, when it's a finished product, it's like, it's never, especially in jazz, because it's so spontaneous. Um, it's never fully just with this band of musicians, everybody contributing. It's always gonna, which is what I love, by the way, about it. But it's always gonna be different than how you imagined it or what you conceptualized. It's always gonna be a little different than that. If you allow it to be, which I think everyone should allow the music to kind of evolve organically, right? Don't try to control it. So that's my approach. That was my approach on this record. I'll put it that way. Was to let things evolve organically, give like a certain kind of parameter, like these are the chords, this is the harmonic, melodic world we're living in. This is, and even the rhythmic world may change because I'm playing drums and I'm not like a traditional drum set player. Like the drums are like my third drum set is like my third instrument. But I knew I wanted the sound of drum set on this record. That's the sound I wanted. So I was like, I'm gonna play drum set. But I'm gonna, I knew I was gonna change up at certain times rhythmically and have it never be like kind of one constant groove ever through, just be constantly kind of on your toes because yeah, that's what war is like. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like for me, right? It feels like even like in the beginning, it's kind of like menacing. And what the opening solo represents is like the town crier, like Paul Revere vibes, like the person that's screaming to everyone, "Come on, let's go! We riding for Big Floyd. Let's go!" That's what that solo represents. Is Irwin speaking to the people, telling them the news. This is what happened. Because the whole project starts off with a song, "The Shift," which to me chronicles the moment George Floyd is assassinated and the public outcry, the international outcry, and the chaos that ensued. Like how it was just like nothing I've ever experienced. So I want to try to encompass that. So so that comes first is like the shift, the moment, and it's the fireworks. Here in New York City, it was like a big thing about fireworks this past summer. It was like huge. So that's like a very timely thing. The fireworks, like it's like the sound of 2020, right? You know what I mean? Is these fireworks. So that's why that is there. It's very intentional. And it also the jolt of it represents the murder, right? And then the women, you have this woman, Amy, my homegirl that I grew up with. That's her. That speech is. I was there for that. So that audio is ripped from a video that I took there. And I spoke to her about it. She was like, "Yes, please, thank you." She was, with me adding it to the project because we was out there together. And then I spliced that with a woman in Ghana who was chanting about George Floyd. So to me, it was just showing that dichotomy, like this black woman across the water, this black woman here, like are both feeling the pain for this brother. Like I wanted to try to show the magnitude internationally of this moment, you know. And so Riding for Big Floyd comes in, and it's literally what the title says. We're riding for Big Floyd, like as a people. That's what we do. We riding for him. So it's the sound of that ride out. You know what I mean? It's very hip hop. It's very New York. It's very funky, groovy. You know what I mean? But it's wild, like a battlefield. You know what I mean? It's a long buildup of tension before before the melody comes in, and it's a bit of a release at some point. But it's for a point. You know what I mean? We're riding out. Truly, that's what it symbolized to me is that revolution music. You know what I mean? And I gotta be like kind of you know I gotta say that with my chest. You know what I mean? That's exactly what I wanted to do is make some revolution music. This is what this shit sounds like to me. This is what riding for Big Floyd sounds like for me. So which like to speak to the energy and the tone, it was like I said, mostly improvised. With some the song "Riding for Big Floyd" in particular. That is the first and only take of that song.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. So in most recording sessions, you keep playing and playing and playing until you get the perfect take. Right. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want anything to be perfect about the music. I wanted it to be raw. And because this moment is not a perfect, cute, manicured moment. This shit is raw. Everything is being spilled out in front of us. So I want the music to represent. I've been making records since I was 14 years old. I know about takes, right? Like you can't tell me nothing about takes. I know I've been doing this a long time. Like I know how to make the perfect record. That's not what I wanted this to be. I didn't want it to represent that. I wanted it to represent the messiness of of this moment, but you could still feel the power of the moment. It's that's why it's mostly instrumental, because I want it can when it's somebody speaking words, now it's that person, now it's their perspective. But when it's music, anybody can own that perspective, right? Like so, yeah, right. So even Black nihilism is, about, I was watching Cornel West, who's somebody I really admire, and I watch a lot of his speeches and lectures and interviews and stuff like that. Because I didn't go to university or college or anything like that. So a lot of my studying is just, I'm like kind of an autodidact. You know what I mean? I'm a lot of reading, watching documentaries and stuff like that, and then I'll pick like certain scholars that I enjoy and will study their work. So Cornel West is somebody who I really dig. Um, and he did an interview with Rolling Stone, and he referenced Black nihilism, and I was just like, whoa. And that's how stuff happens for me sometimes. Like a phrase will jump out. I'm really inspired by words. I'm also a writer and an MC. So words, literally like the shape and the typography of words, the phonetics, the etymology. Like I love words, and they inspire me. The phrases inspire me often. So Black nihilism, that song, what it represented to me is people are asking like, what is the thing? What is it that will make a person burn down their own neighborhood? Right? Like what would make a person burn down the businesses that they frequent? Like, well, nihilism, a sense of like none of this shit fucking matters. This shit ain't mine. None of this fuck all of this shit. Like, you know what I mean? And what is the root of their nihilism? It's a hopelessness that is a result of oppression, right? Like severe oppression and, indoctrination and brainwashing to make you feel inferior and less than, and incapable of creating opportunities for yourself, incapable of being creative, right? Like, so there's a sense of nothing matters. There's no rules to any of this shit. Fuck, I'll burn this whole shit down. That's, you know what I mean? That's to me what that Black nihilism represents, which is why the music is so chaotic and at certain points um angry and dark at times, because I feel like, that's what the energy I was feeling at that time during the uprising is what I like to call it. You know what I mean? And I was hesitant at first to even go out into that shit. I was like, man, it's COVID going on. Like, I'm here with my older, I have elders in my family that I'm around a lot. Like, you know, I'm hesitant. But then I just looked out and saw my people, like literally my people from my neighborhood I grew up with, know my whole life out. I'm like, man, I gotta get out in the streets, man. Like, and as I'm seeing my sisters out there, I'm like, I gotta get out there and protect them. Like, you know what I mean? I gotta be in this. I cannot sit by while this is happening. And what I realized is that everybody was feeling that way. Or most, a lot of us, you know what I mean? But you know, yeah, the music gets really hectic, but then also in the latter half of it, it gets really sweet. And um, so the first half of it is purposely very charged, emotionally charged, because that is to me the thing have right. It's like it ends on a very hopeful note. Brother Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, he's like, you must not be discouraged in struggle, right? That's how the album ends with him saying we must not be discouraged in struggle. The enemy's job is to discourage us, right? And you end up he was just speaking to, it's like what I realized is speaking to the Black Arts Movement 60s 70s, like there's like a repeat cycle of that happening. My parents grew up in that generation, so I grew up a lot of, even the album title Nation Time is a reference to that era, right? The album is analog. The whole album is analog, right? Recorded on the analog board as opposed to digital recording. So it has a warm, older kind of stuff. It's all not all. There's a couple songs where there's Moog and synthesizer. There's synthesizers on it too, but it's like old school synthesizers, like Moog, um, and Prophet, which is not, but it has a mostly acoustic kind of warm sound. That's also purposely done, like kind of a throwback to the 70s. I've been listening to a lot of 70s jazz and music, and I love the kind of lo-fi vibe of it. So that was the influence. Yeah, man.
Yeah, I could definitely tell just from listening. Just so much history wrapped
Mm-hmm.
into it, but
Mm-hmm.
also just realizing how much we're. I don't think people really understand we're living in history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is stuff
Mm-hmm.
that people are going to talk about years from now,
Yep.
stuff to tell our
Yep.
kids, grandkids,
Mm-hmm.
and we're in a moment ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So to see those two eras of just like black struggle and people standing up um, come together and really converge so
Mm-hmm.
closely in time too. It hasn't been a ton of time since the last
Right.
period.
Right. There's people that are alive and well who were in that era.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are in their 60s and 70s. I was just watching an interview with Nikki Giovanni on the Breakfast Club, and she's as radical and like angry as ever. And I loved it. Like it was just incredible. Like she was saying shit that somebody who's 30, like a modern day poet, wouldn't say. Like she was like, yeah, Trump should drop dead. He was like, yeah, telling me to try to give it out. Like, you think, I don't know, I wish it definitely. Like, hell yeah, no.
What did she
I
say?
meant what I said. He should die. I was like, whoa, but that's like that radical tradition. And you know, that's what I'm getting. And to be frank, I'm with her. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that was another point of the record, is to connect those dots.
Mm.
Is to let people who don't know that, hey, we've been through this before, and there's people who we can pull on for information, like Nikki Giovanni, like James Baldwin, like Stokely Carmichael. Um, you know what I mean? One of my favorite uh clips is the Reverend in the beginning. Oh my God, I can't remember his name right now, but I just loved his preaching. He was preaching about Gabriel Prosser,
Mm.
who was who led us. He tried to lead a slave revolt, but he was murdered in South Carolina. Denmark VC, excuse
Mm.
me, not Gabriel Prosser. Denmark VC. So this is in South Carolina. It was at the church, which is, by the way, the same church where Dylan Roof came in and shot
Yeah,
those people.
I'm from Carolina. That's down in Charleston.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. Yes, yes. I got family down there. I got family in Orangeburg,
Mm.
um, Charleston. I love Charleston, by the way. Charleston is great. I love
Yeah,
it.
that's dope.
Beautiful. Like the beach is like, it says it's beautiful. But anyway, yeah. I just loved his theology was around liberation. You know what I mean? I love that idea. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like we need, in every aspect of our lives, we need to be focused on liberation.
Mm.
So But yeah, I want, but yeah, like I was saying, there's this wealth of information that we can tap into from these elders, and a lot of them are still alive. Like Angela Davis is alive and walking around and having discourse with people. Nigga Giovanni's alive and has information. I was just like, whoa. She was just like, it's just incredible. Like Harry Belafonte's still alive. Like these great people. There's people who are, a lot of them are gone, but some of them are still here. And there's not just like famous. Bell Hooks is alive and well. Like, you know what I mean? We can go talk to her. Like, you know what I mean? We can hear from her. So I wanted to also encourage people to do research and study, and be informed about why we are in this struggle, and how to be productive in it.
I think one thing I noticed too when you talked about just like being a bridge for these two generations, even on the track Natoga, I found that track just crazy and really good because of the conversation. I watched the conversation between James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni a few years back, so I've seen it before. But even that, in context of just that interview, was a gap, like bridge in a sense, because this was an older James Baldwin at the time. And Nikki Giovanni was very young at the time too.
He was 28.
Yeah, and you could see them just trying to come to terms with their different influences and how they thought the struggle should be conducted, or really just a pathway forward. And when you just speak about being a bridge and bringing all of those things into this album as well, that really makes that track even more just genius, having that in the background. What was the inspiration?
So that track in particular, yeah, man. So like I said, I created a rhythm, which is like it's a concept that if you're a drummer, you know what I'm saying, and if not, it's hard to explain. It's just like creating a musical it's a composition. You know what I mean? It's a composition. So creating a rhythm is like, it's making a rhythmic composition, right? But the thing about rhythms is like they become a part of like culture and life and ceremony, right? As well. So it's like serves a spiritual purpose. You know what I mean? So it's more than just a composition. It's creating these rhythms, right? So I created the rhythm, like I said, to me, it represents this back and forth, boom, 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 beep, 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 boom, 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 beep, 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 boom, 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 beep, beep, boom, right? It's going back and forth, man and woman, right? And then beep, 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 beep is a baby, right? It's a black family that's happening in these three drums, talking drums from Ghana, and Brekete. So so I created the rhythm, and I knew I wanted to represent the family. So then when I got my computer back, I'm like, okay, I want to make some music that sounds like love, right? That represents love. So I write the chords. Right? I just wrote it on my keyboard. I was like, wow, I like that. And I lined it up with the drum rhythm that I had sung into my phone. Boom, 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 boom. I like beatboxed it, lined it up. Okay, this goes nice. Went to the studio and and recorded the entire album in one day, right? One 8-hour session. So I knew I wanted to do it, so I laid down the drum part. I gave Julius, shout out to Julius Rodriguez, Morgan Guerin, Erwin Hall, the musicians that were on this record with me. Also Scott Lindner, who's my engineer and recording, mixing, and mastering engineer for the project. And yeah, so we're in there. I lay down the drum part. I give the music to the guys to listen to. Julius lays down the keyboards and the bass. Morgan and Erwin lay down the sax and flute parts. So on that song, tenor saxophone, alto flute. So I wanted the flute to represent a woman's voice and the tenor sax to represent a man's voice,
Mm.
right? And I wanted them to musically act out a dialogue. So if you listen to the track again, you'll hear them. They'll play the melody for a while together, then they'll separate and be kind of going back and forth with each other, right? Trading, as we would say. I'm gonna go back to the melody, then go back out, start trading, go back to the melody, right? And then towards the end, you hear the dissension. Things kind of start to fall apart, right? It's this delicate dance. Things are like going back and forth, and then it kind of the chords drop out and it goes kind of, I just really just gave Julius the direction to kind of follow them, and they followed him. Excuse me, to follow each other and down this path of like dissension. And that music, I just let it go. They just came up with that part themselves. I know I wanted to take the drums out and kind of just represent this kind of breakdown, right? That happens in man and woman interaction. Sometimes there's a breakdown, and that's what it felt like was happening right now in the community. I would to encompass it, I'll say I feel like Black women feel like they're not protected by us, and I feel like Black men feel like Black women that we're not seen by them because they're like, and I'm generalizing, but there's this kind of like energy of like, man, y'all gotta do better. And like, we're doing our best, and they're like, your best isn't enough. You know what I mean? It's this kind of like real thing that's happening right now that I'm as an artist also, your job is to observe. So I'm watching, you know what I mean, these conversations that are happening. I'm actually having the conversations as well with my homegirls and, my just people in my community and my peers. So that's where that came from, trying to chronicle that. So the music is done. For me, how I go about producing is we'll create the music and then pull back and edit. Like my production style is like there's going to be some editing and then some additions. We're going to do some try. Let me take that off. Even just how I am when I'm putting on an outfit. I may put on a couple different jackets and see which one I actually want to wear. Put a double different hats, couple different pairs of shades to see which one actually fits with what I'm wearing, right? So same thing with the music. I'm like, I don't like that. I'm gonna take that out. Or this needs more of this. I'm gonna put that in. So what I knew I wanted was that people have, I'm an MC and I'm a singer, so I have music out. It's nothing like this. Even though this has always been in me and I've always knew I wanted to do this. And I've always studied this way of creating. And it's a part of my real lineage through my dad. But it was new for a lot of people. But yeah, I knew that I wanted to I lost my train of thought. Um um what are we talking about again?
Oh, just the conversation between James Baldwin,
Right, right,
Nikki
right, right, right.
Giovanni.
So I knew I wanted to add something to the music,
Mm.
right? And I knew I didn't want my point of saying about the music had already been out is that people would be expecting my voice. And I knew there's some people that might have been expecting my voice. But I knew I didn't want my voice really on that project like that, not that much. But I wanted there to be a voice. So I thought about the idea of adding in these audio clips of things happening, right? Which is how the shift happened, which is how right before at the end, the Reverend gives a speech, and Eric Black Nihilism is the former head of Ebony or the creator of Ebony magazine. He does that speech. That said, America has to face itself or go under. No, America has to face Black people or go under. Right? That's what he says in the end of it. So that punctuates Black Nihilism. It's like, this is what it sounds like when we come and tear shit up. And then the clip is America has to face Black people or go under.
Mm.
This is in 1971, I think is when it was, or something like that. When I took that clip from, or like late '60s. So that's how Black people felt then. That's how we feel now.
Mm.
You have to face us or go under, right? So for Ntokwa, I'm like, okay, how can I represent what this concept in a dialogue? And like everybody else, that episode of Soul with James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni came across my, screen last year, because it was last year around like January, February, when
Yeah.
that Nikki Giovanni James Baldwin thing really came out. Because I remember it sent me on another little rabbit hole, and I found this other clip of Nikki Giovanni reciting a poem on that same show. So she was interviewing Muhammad Ali, um, and I took a piece of that and used it uh, in connection with another song I was putting out last year.
Mm.
Um, so it was just inspiring. But then I just revisited it. You know what I mean? Because that's what I did during like the uprising. If I wasn't out, I was going out and protesting and stuff. But if not, I was home doing research.
Mm.
You know, watching a lot of stuff from the '60s and '70s, and like looking for answers really. Um, and I came across the James Baldwin Nikki Giovanni thing again, and I was just like, man, this shit is so eternally poignant. Like it's just like, to me, what I loved about I was like, people like this, but I'm like, I don't know if people really know what this is.
Mm.
It's like you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, this is like John Coltrane and Charlie Parker on the track. You know what I mean? Having
Mm-hmm.
trading. Like these are like some of the greatest orators, writers, speakers, literary minds of all time, right? James Baldwin, Nikki Giovanni, like, and like you said, the age gap, like, and then it was, to me, what stood out to me was the kindness and the compassion behind the intent of what they were doing, because
Mm.
the way James Baldwin was speaking as a representation of all Black men was so deep to me. Like, you know what I mean? He personalized it, but it wasn't I think a lot of us know James Baldwin. I think he was gay, right?
Mm.
But if you listen to the conversation, he's like, my woman, my kids, my right. Why is he taking that stance? To me, it's about this. I am these people. Like I can speak for them in a way that they cannot speak for themselves.
Mm.
So I will articulate this plight of this Black man, even if it's not my personal situation, because I love this Black man so much.
Mm.
Like that's what I took from James Baldwin, what he was doing, and Nikki Giovanni, what she was talking about, what she was doing, like how she was representing, how just the words we were talking about. Oh, we know, I know you. It was like theater, but it was like, so it was still very noble, right? Like the way they were going back and forth. The shit was just heavy. You know what I mean? To me, like, they're just so brilliant in rhetorically the things that they were saying, the phrases that they were using. It was just like music. It was like two great musicians
Mm.
trading, you know. So I was like, there's a musicality to their voices and all that. I'm like, it's perfect, and it represents the stories that behind the music. Um, and I was like trying to find the right clip, and I was like, man, this was too long. But I was just like, you know what? I cannot cut this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way I can cut any of this. Like, this from here all the way to here. Because that's just one straight clip that
Mm-hmm.
you hear. That's like, I think it's like 6 minutes long or something like that. Maybe 5 or 6 minutes long, the clip I used, which is like, nowadays people use little clips, but they'll use like 30 seconds of
Yeah.
something. Like, you know what I mean? So it was
Mm-hmm.
like, to me, it was like a definitive, this is something else. Like, this is not just like, I know this is not going to get played on the radio. Like,
Like
I'm
you got
making
to hear
this.
this whole thing. You
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
take any of it.
Like, I'm all in.
Mm.
I'm all in for the concept. Like as an artist, I'm going all in for the concept and the idea. It's not about getting spins
Mm.
or like even being super duper accessible. Like it's about the idea. I'm being completely obedient to the idea and the concept, and I'm not editing it in that way. It has to be fully. Like the same thing with the song um Osoya, which is the with the water drumming in Oluwatoyin, her last speech. It was like this. I don't want to cut this. I can't cut her speech. I got to put this whole thing on here. It's like you're gonna get this work. Like you're gonna hear this sister words because we failed. We failed her. We failed her. You know what I mean? That's how I feel. So it's like I want it to be painful for you to listen to this sister. This powerful. You listen to her, she's so passionate, powerful, brilliant, and she's gone. You know what I mean?
Mm.
This is also a thing. And she was killed by a black man. Right? So it's like this is also a thing we have to worry about. And she's on the front lines marching for our lives. And she gets killed by a black man, an older black man. Like, no, man. That's not okay. That's fucked up. Like we gotta do that's like I can't not we gotta like meet this and figure out what's going on. You know what I mean? Like that shit hurt. You know what I mean? So, you know, yeah, and Tokwa was to me to represent that black family dynamic. In many ways, down to the music, down to the way that James and Nikki were going back and forth, and the way it, you know, kind of narratively pans out. Also represents like that. You know, that's why I call it Ntokwa, which means fight or struggle.
Mm.
So if you hear that and in this moment you think I'm talking about the black fighting oppression, but no, I'm talking about fighting each other, right? It's like a eternal struggle. This because the masculine feminine energy is complementary but opposite.
Mm.
So as much as we connect, there's always going to be dissension. It's like it's inevitable. It's never going to be um, perfect. Like you know what I mean. But we need each other. So what I think I forgot to mention, and I'll let you get back in. But like what I also wanted to represent within Talkwa was a way to have this conversation, this dialogue, rooted in love and respect.
Mm.
Right? Because you see, it gets kind of testy, but it's never too testy. Like you see James Baldwin, who's like, come on, he can debate circles around anybody. Like, let's be real. But he understood compassionately what was happening, and he didn't let his ego get in the way. Right? He let the woman's nature be what it is, and he listened. He also challenged, right? But it was out of love. It was like, which is like I want that as a model for how we can have these discussions and conversations, my brothers and my sisters.
Mm.
Let's do this with love and respect. That's all I'm saying. If we really, if our goal is healing, right, or is it punishment?
Mm.
If our goal is really healing, we have to have love and respect. You know, that's what Ntokwa for me is.
I like that. That's definitely a great message to pass on
Mm-hmm.
for people to really get and really to push us forward. Speaking of just pushing forward, the last track, "The Promised Land,"
Yeah.
like you said earlier, brings hope and gives us an outlook for hope. What was just the idea around ending it like that, and what do you see as just the hope for us in our
Yeah.
future, just from an artist perspective?
Right. Man, well, I how that song even came about was I the night before the session, literally the night before the session, like 1 o'clock in the morning, a melody came to me. So I wrote it and I wrote some chords around it. And when we were about to leave the session, actually one of the guys in the band actually had left already. Julius left, and it was just me, Morgan, and Erwin there. And we had like 3-4 more hours in there but I didn't have any more music, or I didn't think I did. And I was like, and I remember Morgan was like, "Yo, come on, like let's lay something else. You ain't got nothing else." I was like, "Man, I got my laptop." I'm like, "Actually, I do have one more thing. I wrote this last night." So I pulled it up, played it. They was like, "Oh, that's cool." They went in there, um, laid down the. Well, me and Morgan went in there, laid down the drums and the bass, and then they laid down horn and they laid down horn parts, the horns, the melodies, and they were trading on that one too. And then Morgan laid a scratch. She laid piano down. I ended up getting what's the name to lay to relay the pianos. So Julius recut the pianos. But initially we laid it. I had no name for it. Um, I was like, okay, what the hell, I was like, I don't know what this is. It feels good. It feels funky. You know what I mean? I did added some percussion on it and um some more percussion on it and yeah it was funky and cool. And then I went home. I had all the music, and that song I was just like, man, there's something I can like write something to this. I can maybe write a song to this because I hadn't intended on singing anything on the project. And I'm like, man, what does this feel like? This sounds like free victory. Like it sounds like a bright spot, right? So I'm like, man, I had been studying. I told you I've been doing a lot of research. I've been studying Dr. King, and I wrote King and I read I watched King in the Wilderness, the documentary about the last days, his last days, and how black people, people wasn't fucking with him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And towards the end of his life, um, and then I got a glimpse of, or rather, it fully connected to me for the first time. That speech right before he died, the night before he died, when he said, "I may not make it there with you, but we as a people are going to make it to the promised land."
Mm.
Like when you grow up, Dr. King is such a ubiquitous figure, especially if you're black, that it's like you can kind of gloss over it. But then I really like paid some attention to what that was, and I was just like, wait a minute, he really knew that he was about to die. Like, because they was calling him and threatening him and stuff like that. Um, calling his house, calling his wife, calling him. Them meaning the CIA, FBI, all that kind of stuff. This is not like conspiracy theory shit. This is the facts. Like, you know what I mean? Um, so who knows who called or wrote a note or said anything to him that night? They said he was sick in his bed, and he wasn't. He was. They kept trying to get him to come out. He was like, no, I'm not going out. He was like, please, Dr. King, please come out. Came out. He had nothing prepared. Off the top of his head, gave that speech. I would love to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but that whole um, I'm not worried, not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Like all that shit. That shit was freestyle.
Mm.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that shit is amazing. Like, you know what I mean? Dr. King was we get his story like this. He went to college at like 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Morehouse, like people don't know, he was like exceptionally brilliant, and like he really was worthy of all of this praise. Like he was a different kind of dude. Like he was like one of the first of his kind in a way. He was a genius, super brave, radical, you know, cat. You know what I mean? So I'm really just getting into him. So this idea of the promised land came to me, and the music to me had gospel evocations. So I was like, what if I write a song in my way? I love gospel music. You know what I mean? I'm not Christian, and I didn't grow up Christian, but I love gospel music. Um, like love it. So it's like this is my way of a nod to gospel music. And I wrote the song in a way that like a preacher saying it. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
okay, children, gather around. I got something to say. God won't give you more than you can handle, and He sure won't lead you astray. I know the road's been hard. You've been bruised and scarred. You're taking us about as much as you can stand. But I'm here to tell you that we as a people are going to make it to the promised land, right? So I'm like referencing Dr. King, referencing preachers and pastors. I know the road's been hard. That's like some straight up like pastor vibes, which is all damn Black American music. Shout out to Nicholas Payton. But yeah, I just wanted to. I leaned into it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
This idea of, and also I've been studying and getting into Afrofuturism and like post liberation ideas. Like I was a part of this great production called 125th and Freedom that explores a post liberated world. Like what happens when we do get freedom, right? These exploring these concepts. So to me, Promised Land is a song that lives in the future,
Mm.
right? It's conceptually like it's about hope. Like you said, it's about hope. It's still like a thing of like we gotta still work.
Hmm.
Like there's some reality in it, so it's not completely sci-fi in the future, but it's looking to the future. I'll say that it's not in the future, but it's looking to the future. Um, yeah. So that's one thing I wanted to do. Where I'm at right now, what I want to do with this project is not really like beat around the bush with the concepts, right? Like really just like fully deliver the idea and just be obedient to what spirit is giving me. Um, and yeah, that's what the promised land represented was just and just like everything. But even some of that, what it was like, I wanted to musically represent celebration. La 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 la. You know what I mean? Like just
Hmm.
kind of like Sly and the Family Stone. A lot of people keep saying George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic, which it's crazy because I didn't grow up listening to that much. I haven't studied intently, but I can see that it's definitely funk inspired though for
Yeah, it
sure.
has a lot of that in it.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, man. So that's what that tune was about. It was just hope. You know what I mean? Promise.
Yeah, that's dope, man. Definitely everything that you set out to do with this project, I feel like you did. Um, the message is
Man.
there, the hope is there, and also really just bottling the feeling that we have in this moment, in this year.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and at just like 33 minutes, I believe is how long it is. It really just pushes you through
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
those emotions in that time.
Hmm.
And I like the project. I really like it.
Thank you,
Um,
man.
well, thank you, Kofi, for coming on and talking to me about
Yeah,
just
man.
you and this
My
project.
pleasure.
Nation Time. It is on pretty much every platform, right?
That's right. That's right. It's on all the DSPs, but if you want to be a real dope individual, you can buy it. And that's at kofihunter.bandcamp.com. You can go on my website,
Mm.
kofihunter.com. I have a residency right now in Brooklyn at Cafe Ezra Lee every 2 weeks. The next, I don't know when this is going to be able to the world to see, but the next one is November 10th, and we'll be doing it from here on out. So come out to
Mm.
the Soul Sessions with Kofi Hunter, and yeah, cop the album, $7. And I'm not working right now, so every dollar helps.
Look,
Yeah,
Bandcamp is dope. I love how it really helps
yeah,
out
man.
artists.
That's
Um,
right,
but again, thank you so much.
man. Thank
Um,
you, thank you.
yeah, and we're gonna sign off, man.
Yeah, man. Right on, brother.